Journey IFC strives to create safe spaces to worship God. Know that you are welcome just as you are, regardless of religious background or lack thereof, skin color, political affiliation, sexuality, age, culture, or any other label you own or society throws on you. You are welcomed and celebrated here just as you are.
Perfect. Hi, I'm Susan. I have OCD.
I'm a recovering perfectionist.
I'm a recovering perfectionist. So yes, I'm going to read a poem. It's called Wild Geese by one of my favorite poets, Mary Oliver. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees. For 100 miles through desert and repenting, you only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I'll tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things.
Hi, I'm Anne, and I'm Junior. Our reading comes from one of the most well-known animal stories from the Hebrew Bible. Then God said to Noah, "Go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you alone are righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of all clean animals, the male and its mate, and a pair of the animals that are not clean, the male and its mate, and 7 pairs of the birds of the air also, male and female, to keep their kind alive on the face of all the earth. For in 7 days I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the ground." And Noah did all that God had commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters came on the earth. And Noah, with his sons and his wife, and his sons' wives, went into the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Of clean animals and of animals that are not clean, and of birds and of everything that creeps on the ground, 2 and 2, male and female, went into the ark with Noah, as God had commanded Noah. And after 7 days, the waters of the flood came on the earth.
I meant to point out earlier that last week we did some planting, and these are some of the seeds from last week that I left here at Journey. So it's working! I hope y'all's are working as well. Y'all have your little plants at home as well. Everything does it. The heavens, the earth, the flowers, and even animals do it. Everything lives for a time just to die and then to be renewed. Life begets death, which seems to beget more life. The cycle never ends, it just transforms, and we are witnesses to this transformation. And we are intimately familiar with life and also with death. And it's interesting, on this eve, right before the first day of spring, that's tomorrow if you didn't know, we are reminded of this cycle. And even though we are back to a couple of cold and darker days, even though the sun was just here, and even though I was wearing shorts, I promise I was. I know while we're eager for spring and the warmth to come, these colder days remind us that the cycle is not in our control. And it's out of our hands for the most part. But as we see, the cycle will still continue. Hopefully, it'll get warmer. In our story this morning, we have this mythological tale that was far more ancient than just the Hebrew scriptures. It's a story that many other cultures adopted in ancient religions. It is not specific to Jews or Christians or Muslims, even though all of them have this story. It's also found all over the world. It's in African traditions and Mesoamerican traditions. It's this tale that's seen throughout Asia and beyond, and that is the story of a great flood. In our Christian scriptures, the tale is called Noah's Ark, a story about a righteous man called to build a large boat and to basically make it a floating zoo, as our song said earlier, while God goes out and wipes out the rest of creation with torrential rainfalls and flooding. It's a story often depicted with cute images, sometimes seen in nurseries, of cute animals, boarding a boat 2 by 2, ignoring the destruction that would soon take place for the rest of creation, a massive genocide, honestly. It's a story that's seen as God's do-over, a mulligan, John. A fresh start, a resurrection even. The story goes that a man named Noah was tasked by God to do the impossible, to build a boat with dimensions large enough to fit his family, along with 2 of every animal, male and female. And not just that, 7 pairs if they're clean animals, because I guess they got to eat something, is my thoughts there. For God was displeased with creation. God looked down and thought, I want to start over. These people are far too wicked. They've strayed too far. This is not good. But God looked and saw this man, this guy named Noah, and he was like, well, that guy's not all that bad. In fact, he was the only righteous one among his generation. At least that's how the story goes. I wonder who wrote that story, right?
Noah's descendants?
Right. Yeah. So God chose Noah to start creation over with. And God gave Noah 7 days after he finished this huge boat to get all of the animals on board before the rains began. And it says that Noah was successful. When the rains began pouring down, Noah, along with all the animals and his family, were safe inside. And then it rained and rained and rained. It rained for 40 days and for 40 nights, which is an interesting number and that has a lot of significance in this season of Lent, the 40 days before we enter into Easter. It's a number often designated for times or periods of trial, of waiting, of wandering. But the 40 days of rain weren't the end of the story for them. They had to wait for a year for the waters to subside. I didn't realize that. 40 days of rain, and then a year later is when they finally get to be on land again. And I can't imagine a year in a boat with not only your family, but your extended family, and at least 2 of every living creature. That sounds like a bit of a nightmare to me. And I love my in-laws, I'll be honest, but I just can't imagine that's a lot of animal poop. That's where my brain goes. That's so much.
Bill Cosby, listen to his song.
Yeah, right? And in many readings of this story, we're given a happy ending where this dove brings an olive leaf back to the boat, a sign that, the waters had subsided and that Noah and his family could celebrate because they had survived the flood. And there's this beautiful rainbow, a sign that God would never destroy creation again. How great of an ending is that, right? But if we're being honest, if this were to happen today, like the floods that have happened recently, we would know that there would be great mourning over the loss of life that had taken place. This isn't a story only about people surviving and living, it's also a story all about death. In the song that we open our gathering with, we hear a story about the unicorn, sung by the Irish Rovers with such a wonderful accent, I have to say. In this fun and folksy song that y'all seem to know, but I didn't know. Y'all were singing along. We don't just acknowledge the animals that made it on the boat, we also look out and see the silly unicorns, as they're called, dancing around, playing their silly little games. They were not included in the animals gathered by Noah because they refused to be tamed of their unicorn ways. They preferred dancing in the rain to being cramped in a boat for over a year. But as the song suggests, the unicorns don't make it, which implies their death. Which makes me wonder who else did not make the boat. Who else died? This story is so often used to build up the character of God as a vengeful God. And it also is used to remind us that humans are evil and flawed by our nature, and that God should be able to wipe us out just because of the sins we partake in. It's an image of a God that uses death as a punishment. The righteous are saved, spared their lives, while the wicked perish in the waters along with the unicorns, it seems. But whenever our soul team talked about this story and this song in particular, we laughed that most journeyers probably would miss the boat along with the unicorns. We figured that we'd be too busy playing and having too much fun in the rain too. As we have discussed throughout this series, all of creation partakes in this series of life, death, and resurrection. Sometimes through physical deaths, or sometimes through metaphorical deaths, times when one thing passes away and a new thing begins, and animals are included in this cycle with us. Springtime is when bears leave their burrows looking for food, out of hibernation and into a new world, a world that can actually sustain them now. It's a time of year when birds start singing, which can be annoying in the mornings outside of our window right now. The squirrels begin digging up what they stored away for the winter. And many creatures start giving birth even, rabbits, chicks, birds of all kinds. The animals that were tucked away in safety can now roam about more freely in a world that is more habitable. Like the animals freed from the ark after a year inside, getting to graze on grasses, getting to perch on trees, getting to live a new life. What was a story all about death is also a story about new life. But one of my biggest issues with this story and how it is often portrayed is that it seems to suggest that death is the opposite of life, and that death is a punishment from God that prevents us from life, a punishment we should avoid at all costs. And if that were the case, our theology probably would be pretty simple, and we could explain away why our loved ones and pets die. We could assume death is a natural punishment, a sign that we did something wrong or deserve retribution. But that isn't how death or life works. People die all the time, and so do animals. But that is a crucial aspect of life. We will all die one day. All living creatures do it. All of creation seems to do it. So why do we assume that this is something other than life itself? Especially when we know that death is interwoven into all of creation. When we can break out of this duality of life and death, we are free to see how death is a natural part of life, something we may be even called to do at times, and not something that is a punishment for our shortcomings. The story of Noah's Ark is just a story, and it reveals a people who probably experienced a massive flood themselves and wanted to make sense of why God would allow that to happen to people they loved. This is a story about people clinging to life, afraid of death, afraid of dying, hiding away in a boat. But like the cycle of life, the story continues. Life begets death, which begets new life. The waters that once were used for destruction were now watering the plants that would feed the animals and lead to new growth and new life. The story never ends in death because death is another part of life, not a punishment, but an inevitability. We will die, and we will experience new life. But if you're like me or like Skylar at the beginning of our service and you got caught up in, well, what about the unicorns in the story? Wondering, what happened to them? Did they really die? I will tell you that the story continues for them as well. Exactly 50 years, and I looked this up, 50 years after releasing the unicorn, the Irish Rovers, they probably had a lot of people writing into them or something. They released the continuing story of the unicorn. And I don't have it to play, maybe we'll have to play it when we're doing our friend bags. But in this follow-up song, we are told that God was heartbroken that the silly unicorns did not make the boat. So God took death and created new life. The unicorns were transformed into narwhals that live in the Arctic and swim and play around to this day. And that is how we can still see unicorns. The song goes, swimmin' free, majestic as can be. The narwhal is the rarest in the deep blue sea. Life, death, and new life, even for the unicorn. So may we be like the lovely unicorn and learn to embrace the full scope of life, even death, dancing in the rain along the way, even if we miss the boat. And may we be reminded that in death we are reborn to new life, knowing that God can take what has passed away and transform it into something new. May it be so. Amen.
You know, I think about how unbearable it must have been in that ark. I've been on cruises that were pretty bad. I can just imagine this one. So we can get a lot out of that story. You know, the unicorns missed the boat because they were having fun. But there were a lot of people on the boat watching them having fun and didn't encourage them to come. So maybe another part of that story is let people have fun, but also warn them the boat's about to leave. Push a little harder. You know, we remember these things fondly, and there's always a lesson to be learned. And what it is to have concern for one another. And somebody says, well, there you go, there's proof that LGBTQ people have no place, because male and female, two of everything. But what they forget was in the very end, there was still a rainbow. Go in peace. Make sure that you keep an eye out for that rainbow, because we are all a chorus with a melody that sounds so wonderful when we're all in harmony. Amen. Amen. Now, for the bags, I have to remind you about that. We'll be assembling those right after. It takes just a few minutes, and take some with you. And remember, as we spoke about in January, when you ask them if they want that bag, why don't you also ask them, my name is Joe, what's yours? Make them a person. Amen.